Hello, my name is Aaron Packard. I'm the curator at Pacific Bonsai Museum in Federal Way, Washington, and I'm here today to talk about the cultivation of bonsai during World War II, specifically its practice in the incarceration camps. We're going to look at a group of individuals who were practicing bonsai at Omachi, as well as the influence of Omachi incarcerees on the Denver bonsai community and how they began to bridge the gap between the Japanese American practitioners and a new interest in bonsai by returning GIs, which really led to the formation of a new and more complex bonsai community in that area. During the years of incarceration, many turned to cultural arts to occupy their time, as well as to explore the heritage for which they had been demonized, as well as to find some type of escape from camp life. The Omachi Camp near Granada, Colorado, was the smallest of all the incarceration camps, yet it had a really high concentration of bonsai artists, notably Sam Doi, Morihei Furuya, and Frank Nagata from Los Angeles. Prior to the war, Sam Doi was one of the earliest bonsai teachers in Southern California. He taught Nagata and Furuya, who were able to actually bring some of their trees with them into camp. When Executive Order 9066 was issued, like all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, they had to get rid of their personal possessions, except for a few items they could take with them. And the story goes that Nagata and Furuya were putting their bonsai trees on the curb out on the main thoroughfare near their home, trying to sell them before they had to report to the Santa Anita Assembly Center. They weren't able to sell all of them, and the few that they were able to take with them into the Assembly Center and then to Omachi, they continued to care for and tend while they were incarcerated. Eventually, they had friends send them objects such as additional pots and stands to where they eventually amassed enough objects to stage their own bonsai show at Omachi. And in their own words, they wanted to do this for the benefit of their community there, to try to bring some level of enjoyment to the community at Omachi. Following their release from Omachi, they all returned to Los Angeles, and the three of them continued to practice bonsai together. They were shortly joined by a fourth student, a man named John Naka, who is now regarded as sort of the father of North American bonsai and the most well-known and recognized teacher in the Western world. He joined them, and then they together were the precursor towards the California Bonsai Association's formation, which would become the country's largest bonsai association. They would continue to teach bonsai, study bonsai together up until 1954, when Frank Nagata would open his own bonsai nursery in Los Angeles, where he would become one of the first to offer bonsai classes taught in English, helped by his daughter, Kei, and his son-in-law, Kahn Komai, who would translate for Frank Nagata to his English-speaking students. In this photo taken in 1930, you see Frank Nagata on the left with his adopted daughter Kei in the middle, and Sam Doi on the right-hand side. Kei Komai, who was also incarcerated at Omachi, would develop her own love of bonsai. Along with her husband Kahn, they would open their own bonsai nursery in Southern California in the mid-60s. While some bonsai cultivation did occur in camp, a far more popular alternative for incarcerees were the creation of papier-mâché bonsai. This example, now in the collection of the Smithsonian Institution, is made of wood, wire, and paper, and was constructed by Rikyo Asada at the Gila River Camp. While some incarcerees decided to return back to their homes following their release, others chose to stay in the area. This resulted in a vibrant Japanese American community in a lot of the areas around the incarceration camps. For Omachi, that meant a bonsai community in the Denver area began to form shortly after the war ended. One of these individuals who was extremely important for the formation of the bonsai community in Denver was Kai Kawahara. Kawahara, originally born in California, returned to Japan for his primary education. While in Japan as a young boy, he was taught bonsai by his grandfather. He returned to the United States in 1937, where he lived until 1942, when he moved to Denver and avoided incarceration. He helped to establish the Denver Bonsai Club with a group of Japanese Americans who had been incarcerated at Omachi. He served as the club's president and their primary instructor for over 2 decades. This Japanese maple next to me is one of his trees that he cultivated since the late 1950s. And to consider cultivating a Japanese maple in the Denver area, which is extremely hot and dry during the summer months, is a testament to his skill set. So much so that he went on to become the curator of the Japanese garden at the Denver Botanic Garden. And along with him and a friend named Robert Kataoka, who also practiced bonsai, they would go and collect wild trees from the Rockies to use in the Japanese garden, which still exists today. Kai was extremely significant to promoting the spread of bonsai in the Rocky Mountain area of Denver, and eventually went on to be accredited by the Japanese Bonsai Association as a master teacher of bonsai. Another reason for the growth of the bonsai community in the Denver area was due largely in part to the governor, Ralph Carr, who was the only U.S. governor at the time who invited recently released incarcerees to settle in the state of Colorado. Robert and Mary Kataoka, along with their 2 young children pictured here at the Rower incarceration camp, chose to move to Colorado based on that invitation. Yet despite governors welcoming, they did not experience that among the other people in their community and faced prejudice and racism upon their arrival. Kataokas tried to instill in their children the values of equality. Bob would say to his kids to treat everyone the same and that they were not better than anybody else. And so despite the injustice that they themselves had experienced, they chose to instill in their children the values of equality and justice, which really translated to Bob's role in the newly formed Denver Bonsai Club. When the club first started, it was exclusively taught in Japanese. It was only comprised of Japanese Americans, and there was very little need or interest to teach outside of, or to teach in English. As GIs began to return from Japan, this really was the turning point for bonsai in the United States, as those who had been stationed in Japan during the Allied occupation became more exposed to bonsai culture, some of which even began practicing it in Japan, returned home and brought with them this appreciation for that aspect of Japanese culture and began seeking out instruction on bonsai. At the time, because the Denver Bonsai Club was being taught only in Japanese, there was this sort of newfound interest, and along with Kai Kawahara and Bob Kataoka, they formed what was a junior club within the Denver Bonsai Club. So the senior club was made up of all Japanese, taught only in Japanese, and the junior club was taught in English and open to anyone who would want to join. It's really interesting to think about this structure in a bonsai club because it touches on the challenge at the time within the Japanese American community, as well as the bonsai community. There was really sort of a tension about whether or not to teach whites bonsai and to even teach it in English. And understandably, there was a lot of resentment and a lot of pain associated with what had happened to the Japanese Americans during the war, and some reluctance to engage with those people outside of their community. And there were other people, though, who were trying to become more inclusive and welcome anyone into bonsai. And you sort of see that, though, playing out in this club as the senior club based on rank, not on age. The senior and then the junior club sort of represented two different groups of people, which would then eventually cause the Bob Kataoka to become the translator for the junior club. So Kai Kawahara would teach in Japanese to the senior club, and then Bob Kataoka would then translate and teach the junior club what was being taught in the all-Japanese club. And in addition to that, Bob would take the junior club out on collecting trips where they would go look for native plant material to use as bonsai. One of those trees that Bob collected is sitting right here next to me. This is a Rocky Mountain juniper that he collected in 1964 on one of those trips. And it's a really fitting tree for us to have in our collection here. It's the only Rocky Mountain juniper we have, so this species representing that environment within the United States, but also the area and the people that sort of used it to cultivate bonsai with. And also the role that Bob played in being really that bridge builder between cultures. And eventually the two clubs sort of merged as fewer and fewer people were joining the senior club and more people were joining the junior club. Those two clubs sort of blended together, and the became a new club known as the Rocky Mountain Bonsai Society, which is still in existence today. And so these two individuals really represent kind of the dichotomy of bonsai at the time, post-war, and the struggles whether or not to bring sort of outsiders in or to expand it to allow bonsai to become more of a widespread practice based on the interest that they were seeing from GIs coming back to Japan. And so we see this sort of throughout the bonsai community, as a lot of bonsai clubs, as well as on the West Coast, had all Japanese language clubs that eventually sort of phased out or sort of vanished in lieu of these more inclusive English-speaking bonsai clubs.